What's up, YouTube? It's the homie Joshua, and today we're going to talk about anger management. And so, this is just going to be an introduction to some basic principles. I'm actually a trained and certified anger management facilitator, and so I'm going to use the framework of that curriculum, but communicate it in my own style, right? In my own examples and my own experiences. And so, first of all, who can benefit from an anger management course, right? Most people struggle with anger in some form or fashion. So it's not just people that are running around yelling at folks or running around swinging on people. It takes a variety of angles, so to speak, right? Some people are angry with themselves. Some people are angry with specific others. Some are just angry at the world. Some don't even know why they're angry, right? Or some mix of all of the above. And so personally, I think that material like this can really benefit a lot of folks. And even if you come into this not feeling like navigating anger is a struggle for you, you might learn some tools that help you in dealing with family or coworkers or friends or whatever, right? Um, and you may realize coming through this that there's some tools that are helpful for you, right? Maybe in how you communicate or your self-talk or whatever. And so this is going to be a weekly series. Um, I want feedback from you guys in terms of should it be a live where we can interact with each other real time? Should it just be recordings? That kind of stuff. So feel free to let me know, or else DM me on Instagram, the homie hangout, and let me know what you think. So with that said, let's introduce these 8 tools to you, and and then we'll move on from there, right? In future episodes. So recognizing stress, right? And these are in no certain order, but recognizing stress. Stress is very bad for you, right? It's bad for your body, it's bad for your mind, it's sometimes bad for people around you, but it's unavoidable. Everybody's going to experience stress sometimes in their lives, and not once or twice, right? Like it happens. The question then is, what can we do to minimize that stress? And when we can't really minimize it or we can't make it completely go away, how do we respond to it? What do we do with that stress, right? What's our outlet? Stress is often like the trigger for anger, right? If you want to think about a gun, um, stress pulls the trigger, and the anger is what comes out the other end, right? And so if if we're dealing with a double barrel shotgun, how do we get that down to dealing with like a 38 maybe, right? Um, and go from there. So this is not a perfect recipe. This Following these steps does not mean you will not get angry, right? That's not what it is. I've gotten angry since I took this course. I've acted out of anger since I took this course. I've avoided a lot of situations since taking and teaching this course, though, as well. And so it's a help, it's a tool, right? It's not a magic pill. And so, step two, right, or tool two, develop empathy. See things from the other person's perspective, right? And so, one example, from my life is infidelity in my past relationship, right? I cheated on her a couple times, and she cheated on me, right, later. But which doesn't make either one of us right. But this isn't a relationship spiel; it's an anger management spiel. So she would start coming to me years and years and years after I had cheated and asking me questions and implying not so subtly that she thought I was still cheating, right? And she'd be on me, and I try to answer. I try to show that I wasn't. I would even make some decisions that were not in my own best interest, but just out of concern of her reaction and everything else, right? And I won't get into all the details, but it was a lot. And I got angry. I got stressed and I got angry. And one thing that helped, although it didn't cure stuff, we got divorced, right? But was so how I could have applied empathy, maybe is a better example or a better way to put it, is see it from her end, right? That I had broken that trust in a relationship at some point. She did not anticipate that coming. She didn't think that I was going to do that. And so now she's a little gun shy. She's a little nervous. And she just wants to protect herself. And I actually did wrong in the past. And so, maybe this is what I got coming, right? Now, from her point of view, she could have developed some empathy, right? And she could have said, "Hey, this guy's been really committed to our relationship for all these years, right? And yes, I'm having some concerns, and yes, I'm having some fears, but what are those coming from, right? Is it because I'm working more? Is it because you know I'm not feeling good, so I'm not being as affectionate or whatever? Like, why is she jumping from something ain't right between us to you must be cheating? And and wow, that would probably be offensive for me to keep bringing that up, right? So it doesn't mean either one of us would stay quiet, but she could have approached the situation a little differently, and I could have approached it a little bit differently, right? And so empathy can go a long way, right? Respond versus react. So reacting is if you go to a CD player, right? I was gonna say jukebox, but a lot of people ain't seen a jukebox. If you go to a CD player and you're like song five and you press play, you're gonna get song five, right? Every time, as long as it's working. That's just a reaction, right? It's automatic. You do this, and that's gonna happen, and that's what normally works, right? You're walking through the store, somebody's looking at you crazy. You just react, right? It's doesn't matter who's around, doesn't matter where you're at, nothing matters. What matters is you're wired, just like that CD player is wired. You're wired that when this happens, this is what I do. And a lot of us are wired to react in certain ways to certain things, right? Even if it's as simple as somebody cuts you off on a freeway, you honk the horn, flip them off, tell them to go to hell, and everything else, right? Um, it varies. But the point is, it's helpful to learn how to respond instead of react, to not be so automatic, basically to not give anybody or anything else that level of control over you. Um, if I know you're going to react a certain way, I control you more than you can control yourself. So if I want you to get into a fight in the county jail and get in trouble, I know how to make that happen. And I can go to you and I can push a button and guaranteed you're gonna swing, and then I get what I wanted. I might get whooped too, but my goal is met, right? So it's dangerous to us, and we don't do ourselves any favors by being wired to react. But it comes out of the norms that we experience. And honestly, it's easier to react than to respond, because there's no thought in it. There's no question. There's no thought. But there's also a lot of consequences oftentimes to that reaction. And we don't like those, right? So respond is, again, giving it some thought, right? Considering what's going on. Man, this dude's looking in my direction, but is he looking at me crazy? Or am I walking past a poster that says some wild on it or has some weird picture and dude's like, what is that? Um, is he looking at the person to the side of me, right? Like, is he just making a funny face because he smells his upper lip? And I'm so hyper alert of what's going on around me. So pause, right? Pause and respond. And we can train ourselves to respond as well, which is healthier, right? And it takes practice and it takes time, and it's not always perfect the way that reactions are, but it's helpful. Another tool number four, right? Change your self-talk. We all have a voice in our head. We all have a conversation with ourselves. That doesn't mean that we're JCat or schizophrenic or whatever. Shout out to those who are, like, nothing personal. Um, but we do have these conversations, right? I can't believe this person said this. I can't believe this person did that. Who do they think they are? Who do they think I am? Man, I can't let that go. Man, this she keeps doing this. Man, I've warned him. I told him, uh, I don't really want to do this, but I need to. He's got that coming. He needs to learn a lesson. It's all kinds of self-talk, right? How dare that person cut me off on the freeway? Man, I'm over here trying to get to work. If I don't get to work, I don't get to keep my job. If I don't get to keep my job, I don't get to feed my kids. This person's taking food out of my kid's mouth now. And F them, right? They ain't got no right to do that. So self-talk. Um, we can decide what we say to ourselves. We are in control of that inner voice. We don't, again, it's some of the stuff is about sort of being a slave to our norms. Um, we're not locked into that. And there's nothing wrong with choosing to change the dialogue in your head. Again, it takes work. It's easier. It's always easier to keep doing what you've always done, right? It's a habit, it's a routine, it's whatever, but it's always easy to keep doing what you've done. It's always a challenge to do something different. And the question is, does is it worth it? Does the reward for changing course outweigh the harm of just continuing on as normal, right? So tool number 5, right? Communicate assertively. And so at least I know for me and a lot of other people I know, I can get really angry when I'm trying to get a point across to somebody and they don't seem to get it. And especially when it's personal, right? When I'm trying to tell somebody how I feel, or when I'm trying to tell somebody how their actions are impacting me, or what my expectations are, or if I'm trying to express some unmet need, even though I might not use that language, that's really what it boils down to, right? Is some need of mine is not getting met, and it could be because of one person or a group of people or whatever, right? So we're trying to communicate it, and but then we get angry and we flash, right? This happens a lot in domestic relationships, which I'm not justifying domestic violence by any stretch, but it can lead to domestic violence often because one person is trying to express themselves and the other one just isn't getting it. And and oftentimes the one who's trying to express themselves feels like the one who's not getting it is not getting it on purpose, right? Which just makes you more angry. That may or may not be true. And so what do? Right? Do you just give up on the idea of expressing yourself? I tried that in my marriage and it didn't work. The whole happy wife, happy life thing. No, I'm not built like that. Right? I really tried and it didn't work. I tried to just let stuff go. You know what? I'm not gonna react. Right? Um, but but then I'm not communicating needs that I have or expectations that I have. All I'm doing is receiving communication about what she needs, which then makes it even more difficult to stomach the idea that I can't express those things. And it didn't lead to violence between us, but it did lead to anger. And so there's tools to learn how to communicate what you need to assertively, which assertive is not the same as aggressive, right? Assertive is just clear and though there's weight behind it, right? Look, man, this is where I'm at. This is what's going on. This is what I'd like to see. And it doesn't mean you get your way, but you communicate assertively and in a way that the other person can understand. In prison, we called it effective communication, right? And the definition I would use for effective communication is not just saying what you mean, but it's saying what you mean in a way that the other person understands it the way you want them to understand it, right? That's effective communication. Somebody can hear you, but they can take it different than what you mean. And if that's the case, then you haven't done a good job communicating effectively to them, right? Because you gave them a point, but you didn't give them the point that you plan to give them. So what's the use, right? So, anyways, communicate assertive. We're going to go over that, right? Adjusting our expectations. A lot of times, I think, especially as guys, but also, I'm sure women in their own ways, we have expectations of how things are supposed to be. Um, when I came home from prison, I had expectations of myself and how I was supposed to be and how my life was supposed to look and how everything around me was going to operate, right? And that's one of the dangers of developing this concrete plan before you come home. Because then you come home and it slaps you in the face and the plan falls apart and you're like, what do I do? Right. So Not to say don't plan, right? That's, I don't want to get sidetracked, but you got to adjust expectations. And sometimes you adjust them up and sometimes you adjust them down, right? Sometimes you need to not expect as much from somebody. Sometimes you should expect more, right? And the anger comes because they're not performing, right? And but you have a right to expect that they do, right? So anyways, adjust expectations. We'll go over how to, kind of recognize and some tools to be able to do that. Forgive but don't forget. You knew that was going to have to be on here somewhere, but I want to make a couple points clear. So you can let go of resentment, yet still protect yourself in the process. I think some people misunderstand this forgive but don't forget, right? Um, Sometimes what forgiveness looks like is acceptance, and not acceptance that what this person did to harm you was right, but just accepting that, look, man, it happened, right? It is what it is. And what am I gonna do from here? You know, um, I'm not going to engage with this person in the same way, right? I'm not, so I'm not gonna forget. I'm not ready to go sit down and have a beer with them or drink some coffee. Like they're not that forgiven, right? You just accept it for what it is. And even that can help let go of some of the resentment, right? Man, I jumped into business with a snake, you know, and thankfully I caught on, as early as I did, and it wasn't later. And yes, I could take different routes to address this, but is that worth it? Man, I got 3 kids, I got, bills to pay. Um, is this worth it? Is the pride and ego worth it? Is the potential harm to my family worth it? Right. And maybe it is. Every situation is a little different. So maybe you think it is. That's an individual decision. But I'm willing to bet that most of us have, uh, those of us that have a violent history, most of us have um, engaged in something out of resentment that wound up costing us more than what that was worth. Right. And so again, it is a tool, and it's not this cheesy slogan, right? It's just learning how to accept, man. Sometimes bad stuff happens to you. Sometimes you got the short end of the stick. Sometimes people burned you. And and sometimes, probably a lot of times, that wasn't your fault, right? But are you gonna go around and get even with everybody that harmed you? And what does even look like? You know? Um it my younger brother was shot and killed in 1995, right? And he was almost 17, and he was a good dude, and I plan on doing a video about him, um, when it comes closer to his birthday, July 5th. But um, so I won't get into all the details now. But I wasn't going to forgive, and I wasn't forgiving nobody, right? And I've had homeboys that have passed, and we go ride for them, right? And as weird as it sounds, it- I was surprised they didn't come back, right? Like that whole retaliation thing, that whole holding a grudge thing. Like I was doing this for them, I thought, right? And they didn't come back. And now I lose sleep at night over stuff, right? Um, so that incident has long lasting power over me. That resentment and my response to that resentment, it's what 20 some odd years later. And so I think it's valuable to learn some tools in how to do that. And we'll walk through it together. And then the last one, and then I'm gonna cut this off, is taking a timeout, right? The science itself says that once your stress level reaches too high, and what's too high varies from person to person, right? But once your stress level reaches too high, my tank top's poking up. Um, then it is impossible to compromise. It is impossible to think rationally. So you sitting there getting into it with somebody at some point, and we've all been there, right? Where now you're just fighting, you've lost track over what you're fighting about or what you're arguing about. You're just arguing because they're arguing and you're going in circles, nothing's getting resolved. You're not going to give an inch now because they've been hella disrespectful. They're not going to give an inch because you've been disrespectful, and nothing happens from it, right? Nothing positive, at least. It it makes more sense to back up for a minute, and there's some boundaries around that, right? If you are going to back up, you generally want to set a time for when you're going to get back together, right? And look, man, I'm gonna go for a drive for a couple hours. Look, I'm gonna take the dog to the park. Look, man, I gotta go to work, and then I'll come back, right? Just basically, let's put a pin in this conversation and pick it up later. And the hope is that both people, when the stress level goes down, get to kind of thinking about the situation more rationally, and maybe have some ideas around a compromise. To be clear, that does not always work, right? And it takes two people willing to do that. One person can kind of be the lead on it, can suggest it, but if the other person is going to sit there and in their self-talk keep themselves going all stressed out and crazy, then when you get back together, the conversation is not going to change because they're going to come at you the same way that they were coming at you before, right? Um, and probably because they don't know how to communicate assertively, right? So all this stuff kind of flows together, right? Um, and that's what I want to explore with you guys. I think it'll be helpful. If you like this content and you haven't subscribed to the channel already, I encourage you to do so. I have a lot of other videos up around different subjects, so feel free to check those out. And yeah, let's make this a weekly thing, man. Get at me in the comments and let me know what you think. Would this be better done on a weekend day? During the week, I'm gonna try to drop somewhere around 12 and then somewhere around 4, just to kind of give space to some of the other channels to maximize the algorithm for them. And so, yeah, give me some feedback and let me know what you think, right? Uh, until then, help others move in excellence, be a homie, and help yourself, right? It's the homie Joshua. Stay blessed.